I think it's harder for someone like you, Greg, to actually like sit there and say, what, do I really have a problem with that? If you're a person like me, like I never had an off switch. You know, that's why my sponsor in AA used to tell me. He was a recovery therapist too, and he'd say, Chris, all you have to know about yourself, you don't have to worry about anybody else's drinking or using, is like, have everything, the ways you've tried to control it worked? And I said, wow, I have never had that. I don't even get that. I mean, so for me, like people like you that can actually like sometimes not like go out and just have that going off the deep end experience with it, like I look at that like magic. You know, my sister's a user. Like using is social use, right? Where you don't have any of those problems, where you don't put yourself at risk in any way for harm. Abuse just means that you put yourself at risk for harm in some way, or to create problems for yourself. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily dependent, but that is causing you problems, okay? So, but I think it's harder for people that sometimes can play with it and not get burned than it is for people like me that, I mean, I was just convinced, like from the time I first used it, I look at that and I just go, wow. I watch my sister drink wine with dinner and she'll leave half a glass. And I go, are you gonna drink that? And she's going, you are such an alcoholic. And I just go, but you're leaving alcohol in the glass. And she goes, wow. So I think that's harder for a person that, like you. And so you have to like, if you're going to start thinking about this, you have to look back over your whole history and start looking at like, some people that never get dependent have to decide, should I use again? You know, because some people wind up having like one incident. Like I had a guy that he and his, when I worked on the Decatur at Park Center down there, one of my clients came in, he was not an alcoholic. They wanted to say he was. But he came in and he was a social user, right? I didn't know what a social user was, and so my sponsor said, go ask somebody that is about what's their motivation to drink or use. And social drinkers and users use just to enhance the evening. It's not the reason for the evening. Their life isn't totally centered around it. You know, my sister used to say, you mean you skip lunch and dinner to get drunk faster later? And I go, yeah, I'm an economical drinker. Because if you eat, you're just going to have to drink more to get drunk, right? Or you're going to throw up your food, so I don't want to waste food. And she goes, that's the most screwed up thing I ever heard. that's just messed up. And she says, social drinkers don't think like that, okay? So he and his wife had 7 kids, and every Friday night was a date night. So they got a babysitter, because they said, we got to have a night just for ourselves. And they usually got to the restaurant early, and they would split a little pitcher of beer thing, right? Between themselves, but they would be there for like 2 hours, and it takes, for every 1 ounce of alcohol in a drink, which is like a 12-ounce beer, 3 ounces of wine, or a shot, right? It takes 1 hour for your liver to get rid of it, so that you won't test positive when you blow into the thing, okay, like for a DUI test. So he got there late that night, and he drank more in a shorter period of time. Sure enough, he pulls out, right? And they caught him. Got sent over, had to do all the education classes like this and come in, and his probation officer kept saying, I know you're lying to me. You drink more often, and you're like, you drink every Friday night, you're an alcoholic. And I went, oh my God, I said, he doesn't know anything, right? This probation officer thinks that anybody that drinks and gets caught is automatically an alcoholic. And I said, what's your motivation for drinking? He says, well, it's just something that, it just helps. It just goes with the food that we eat. I mean, because I'm not planning to get drunk. He said, I blew a .08. All right, I think he had like 3 beers. Okay, and he wasn't like sitting there trying to get drunk. And so I said, so what does that mean for you? He goes, I think if like when I go out with my wife, I just had to have a better plan around my drinking. And I said, because he'd never had a DUI, he'd never had any other problems related to that, right? And he only drank that one night out of the week. He and his wife had the beer. That was it. He didn't drink any other time. So what he did was he got a breathalyzer off eBay. And when they went to the restaurant, they had a beer. His wife and he would both blow in it. And if they blew a .06, they called a cab. .05 or below, either one of them could drive, right? Home. if they blew a .06, because you know that like when you drink, like your blood alcohol rises for a little while, right? That's why they test. That's why they give you the breathalyzer when they arrest you, and then when they take you to jail, right? They'll give you one later, and then charge you with a higher one. So if you got arrested with a point like .09, and then they tested it like a couple hours later there, then you blow what, like a .14, they'll charge you with that instead, because they can keep you in probation longer. Because probation's a business, right? Yeah. Right? It's a business. And yeah, business is good, and they like their customers. All right? They don't have a motivation for you to like really get better, because they like customers. Okay? So his plan was that, and he said, that's my plan. He says, if I blow a .06 or above, we just call a cab to drive us home. And I saw him at the grocery store down there one day, and it was like 2 years later, and I said, how's your plan working? He says, it works great. So he says, got my breathalyzer in my car, we just blow before we leave the restaurant. And he says, the one thing I never do is put the key in the ignition before I blow in that thing. Because, you know, if you put the key in, that's when they get you, right? Okay, so take the key out, put it on the seat, no, whatever, all right? So, and he had no more problems after that. So he abused one time because he just wasn't aware that he was a .08, okay? So he went back and he could actually use, because he didn't have a pattern. It wasn't a pattern of abusing and things. So he just had more awareness. But I looked at him and I said, wow, that's like magic to me. I don't know how you do that. Okay, so that's abuse, is a pattern of putting yourself at risk for harm or having some problems in your life. When you cross over into dependence, when you depend on something, you start feeling like you need it, right? It stops feeling like a choice. And that's when you start having symptoms of dependence, chemical dependency. Okay, so once you cross that line, then there's different changes in your brain and everything in your body that actually make it harder to stop at that point. And you have to have 3 or more of these. And I asked one time, I said, I learned about this, like, this is how the court system decides, you know, abuse, dependence, like where they want to send you sometimes for treatment or whatever that is. And I said, how did they come up with this list? Was this just some psychologist or some therapist or just somebody else saying that? They interviewed over 500,000 people who said that they either identified themselves as having abuse problems, or they identified themselves as being like later stage alcoholic, addict, you know, dependent. So they actually interviewed 500,000 people to get this list. So it was actually people who it wasn't people who were like sitting on the outside going, well, we think this is what you are. Okay, so that made me feel better that at least it was people like me self-identifying, okay? So to get a pattern like of substance abuse, to get dependent, you actually start having 3 or more of these symptoms. So one is tolerance, okay? That's where you start having, you need more of the drug to feel the same effect. Or if you use the same amount, keep using the same amount, you don't feel the same effect anymore. Okay, you just go, oh, okay. So tolerance, you need more of it to feel the same. Withdrawal is like physical withdrawal. Actually starting going through physical withdrawal from your drug, or psychological withdrawal. You know, they always say that, like, you know how they always used to say that, like, pot, you can't get physically dependent on it? Or they're finding out now that's not true. But they always used to say that. I mean, flush a pothead's pot down the toilet and see what kind of withdrawal a pothead goes through, right? Okay.
When I would smell it when I first started quitting,
yeah.
I would smell of the people.
Trigger,
yeah.
Big trigger. Okay, and we're going to talk about.
People don't know what lids are anymore.
Yeah.
That must have been a long time ago.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it was a long time ago. So, but you know, it's like that was. So that's psychological withdrawal. So you can have physical or psychological withdrawal from the drug. Okay, that's another symptom there. Do you know the only drugs you can die from going through withdrawal? Anybody ever told you? Alcohol and like benzodiazepines. Okay, like Valium, Ativan, Xanax, things like that. Okay, because they lower your central nervous system They slow down your breathing, your respiration. If you keep doing it long enough, after a while, your body says, hey, I trust you that you're going to keep using me. So what it does, it speeds up your heart rate and your respiration and your pulse and everything because it's trying to counterbalance it, right? Because your body tries to stay in balance or homeostasis. So your body just starts going, man, you know what, Chris, I trust you that you're going to keep drinking. So I'm going to rev that up, all right? And then so if all of a sudden you just say, I got to quit, and you stop, it's like taking a spring off of a weight. You know, they always tell people if you're on Ativan or Xanax, you know, from your doctor because you have panic disorder, don't just stop because you'll have a stroke. Because it's like taking a weight off a spring and it just goes through the roof. You know, I had a guy that came in my office at Park Center one time, and he was sitting there, and it was hot outside, but he was purple. His face was purple, his ears were like almost black, and he's just breathing real hard, and he's just sweating. And I said, did you just run over here? Like, I know it's hot outside, but he says, no. I said, well, what's your drug of choice or preference? And he said, alcohol. I said, how much you drinking? He goes, well, a fifth keeps the shakes away, and 2/5 makes me feel normal, you know, in a day, right? So I said, well, when's the last time you drank? And he goes, last night. I didn't want to come in here drunk because I didn't want you to think I was that bad, right? And I said, oh my God, we got to get you to the hospital right now because his blood pressure was 210/140. Yeah, I said, don't move. We're going to call. I don't want you even walking, right? You know, we called the ambulance. They got him over there, and he was on. What they do is they give you Valium, and they wean you. They take you through withdrawal. It takes about 7 to 10 days to do that. Okay, so in the old days, you know what they used to do, and they used to go out and do 12-step calls and to the institutions and everything. They used to take alcohol with them, straight up ethyl alcohol, and just feed it to people to make sure they didn't die on the way to the hospital if they were going through withdrawal, because they didn't have those drugs back then. So they gave people ethyl alcohol, you know, grain alcohol, and weaned them off slowly over a week. Because they said if they're not, they're going to have a stroke or a heart attack and they're going to die, okay? So those are the only 2 drugs you can die from. Those are 2 classes of drugs, and that's why. People think it's like heroin. People always go, heroin? And like, I know you'll feel like you're going to die. Or opiates, you know, because you're so sick and everything. But you won't die from that, from withdrawal. So alcohol, and then benzodiazepines, okay. You know, like Xanax, Valium, Ativan, you know, all those kind of things. Okay. The other symptom is loss of control. That's where you take the larger amounts or over a longer period than you intended. You know, that's where you make promises to yourself or to other people. Like I used to tell people, I swear to God, I'm only going to drink 4 beers tonight. That's it. You know what? 18 beers later, I'm driving home going, damn, how'd this happen? And you meant it at the time, right? Okay. Or I'd buy meth and I'd say, I'm going to make this last. Put it in the fridge, you know. It's going to last a week. 2 days later, I'm right back at the house, right? Okay, that's loss of control, where you just take it in larger amounts or longer than you intended to. You have efforts to control or cut down. You tried it. You start going, oh, you know what, I got to control this. So you try, but they're unsuccessful. Okay, so, and that can be like changing your drug of choice too. Like, remember, alcohol was getting to be a problem, so I just switched to pot. Well, then I started getting arrested for, the first time I ever got arrested was walking across Central Park, smoking a joint. And it was some good stuff. I can't remember, like early 80s or whatever, you know, and I was just like smoking this. And they have cops on horses in New York City, okay? So I'm walking through Central Park, and this horse's head just appears right here, right, okay? And I was so high. And the cop said, man, that smells like some good okay? And I freaked out. I thought it was Mr. Ed talking to me, right? I was like, Mr. Ed is talking to me, okay? All right, so, but I was like smoking so much from the time I got up till I went to bed. I wasn't drinking anymore, you know, because I couldn't drink and go to work, because when I drink too much, I can't talk. I mean, like literally, I cannot talk. My brain says I want to talk, but I'm so drunk that my mouth goes, you know, I just can't talk. So I thought, I can get high and go to work. Well, it wasn't long before I was getting high from the time I woke up till I went to bed. And then I kept getting arrested for public, you know, using in public.